Los Angeles, California, covering the Charles Manson death. Good morning, Alex Stone.
McGraw, good morning to you. And his death really not coming as any surprise last night. He had been sick for days. He had been hospitalized in the Bakersfield area, even though the prison system wouldn't say where he was and local officials wouldn't say where he was. It was pretty clear based on the Department of Corrections vehicles that were parked outside of that hospital. But last night, word coming in at about 8:13 last night, he died. Word came in about an hour later. They spent that hour, the prison system, notifying the families of his victims to say that this man who created so much terror in their lives, that he was finally gone, and telling them that he had died in his hospital bed. And at this point, this is the end of what he did over so many decades.
It was 7 murders over 2 nights 50 years ago. Why is it that Charles Manson is still a major story today?
Well, it was such an incredible and an incredibly sad story at that time. America's most famous serial killer, even though he didn't use the weapons, his weapons were his followers, and that he inspired the members of the so-called Manson family to kill strangers, people that they didn't know, that they had no connection to, just because he told them to, and that it was part of this plan. He told them to spark a race war, partially inspired by the music of the Beatles, that this was somebody who had incredible amounts of control over his followers. Plus, he was the boogeyman of the late 60s and early 70s, with the swastika on his forehead, coming up every couple of years for parole, denied every time. That this was the image of evil to many people, and now that evil has been put to rest.
Yeah, it's amazing how Charles Manson was supposed to be put to death. To go into this story, because this is kind of interesting, he was sentenced to die, but through a series of quirks in the law, he was given life behind bars.
Yeah, and it wasn't even life without parole, because California didn't have it at that time. That it was 1973. The California courts put the death penalty on hold. He had been given death in his sentence in 1971. Then the courts got involved, and all sentences of death in California were to be turned into life in prison. In 1977, his sentence was officially turned into life in prison, but there was no life without parole, so he went up for parole 12 times. He was always denied, but every time it created this, what if he gets out scenario. And we would hear from the family members saying he can't get out. If he did get out, here's what he would do. But every time the parole board saying, heck no, this guy's not getting out, that he's not remorseful. He isn't sorry for what he did, that he continues to have these issues talking about what went on back in the 60s and 70s, and that, no, he wasn't going to get out. And he didn't get out. But what we're hearing today, McGraw, is from the families of the victims. We've heard from Sharon Tate's sister today, saying they don't feel any relief with this because his followers are getting out and they're getting parole. They're the dangerous ones. They're the ones who committed the murders. They say that they are concerned about them and them being free, even though they're elderly now, that they really weren't worried about Charles Manson. They never thought he was going to get out.
Yeah, his followers are still in. One died, but the rest of them are still in jail. They're talking about paroling them at some point?
Yeah, they're beginning to get parole now, and they have already, one has been granted parole. Others are coming up for parole and likely to get parole. And the belief is that if they make it, at least life-wise, if they're still alive, that they will all probably be granted parole at some point. And that's where the family members come into it, and they say it was the imaginations of these people following this leader that fueled these murders, and that what if they get out and do something? Now, of course, all of these followers, they go before the parole board and say no, that they didn't know what they were doing back then, that they were young, that they shouldn't have followed him. And the parole board is saying okay, and allowing, at least beginning to allow them to see the light of day. That's what these family members are concerned about. They say Manson was never a threat to them. Yeah, he was the crazy cult leader, but they knew he was going to die in prison. It's these people they're worried about.
Alex Stone with ABC News in Los Angeles. Alex, thanks for checking in.